Okay, so yesterday we built the API side for authentication and authorization, and today we're going to join it at the hip with React and add a sign-in form, and then you can sign in, and then I'll say, here's your email. And then we'll be able to also, if you remember, that you had to have a JWT, so you had to be like logged in to be able to list all the products. So that's what we've got here as well. It's fairly basic, just says how many there are. We'll also have the ability to, because what happens when you refresh the page is that everything gets forgotten. So we'll be using local storage to remember that and keep you logged in. So it's a fair bunch to it. So we'll jump straight in. It looks quite simple, but there's actually a fair amount here. So I'm going to be working from my master branch. So that's the point where we got up to yesterday. If you want to get the latest copy, you can get it here, or where we left off yesterday will be appropriate. Otherwise, go to the challenges channel, code so far, open that link, and clone it, and then you branch from the master branch here. So you can see the latest commit there was add JWT authorization. So that's where you should be up to if it's your own. So, is that checked out? Come on. There we go. So if we go into our project terminal, we'll see that we've got two folders here, API and web. And so API is our Node.js backend, of course, and then web, at the moment, if you have a look at it, it's just an empty folder. So we're going to use create React app to create that thing. Yarn create React app web.
Does it have to be, yeah, which folder do we run that
The
from?
top folder.
Your
Yep, my project root. So my project is called Yara, so I'm from that folder. So yarn create React app web. And I had a bit of an issue yesterday. I think my path settings have stuffed up or something like that. So it wasn't happy with me. With yarn create, I've somehow fiddled with something and now it's blown up. Maybe it's working now. So yeah, I've got some sort of NVM issue. I'm not sure what's going on there. It's just sometimes Yarn is just not happy. So what I have to do is so what Yarn create does is find the create and then whatever the subcommand. So Yarn create React app installs a create React app tool. So I just have to run that directly. But I don't think you should have that issue. It's just a bit of a pain. So if it's been working in the past, it should work for you. I've just done something with my settings and stuffed everything up. So once you've done that, you should have the usual create React app instructions appearing here. Yarn start, yarn build, yarn test, yarn inject, and so on. So open the whole project up in GitHub, in VS Code. So API folders, the stuff from yesterday. That's the Node.js backend with its own package.json. And then what we've got here is the web folder, which is a React app with its own package.json as well. Yarn create React app and then the name of the project, which I've just called web.
Can I see the command?
We're inside the Yarrow folder and we're creating a new React app that lives inside. So there's going to be two parts to our Yarrow, the back end and the front end.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's
So this is just sort of minor, but create React app calls its little startup script start. So I just so I don't have to really remember. I just create a copy of it and rename that copy dev. So then it doesn't matter which one I add. I'll just go yarn dev. So if you've got your git ignore in the project root, it should be ignoring node modules. So it should be ignoring this one here and the one in API as well. So I'm just going to jump in now into like app.js and just gut the contents of the div. We don't want that stuff. Get rid of the import logo.svg. And just delete some of the stuff. So there's a logo SVG file, just bin that. It's not going to be a problem if you don't delete it, but we just, we don't need this stuff, so let's just clean it up. Yeah. Then I'm going to go into app CSS and pretty much delete everything there, except the first rule, app.app textline center. And I'll just keep that for now. We'll change it later on. And then, so gutted the app.js, like we usually do, gutted the app.css. Next is index.js. We've got this import register service worker. I'm just going to comment that stuff out. I don't want that on for now. It can lead to issues with caching. Just want to disable that stuff. So with our stripped back React app ready to commit, so add React web front end, or just add React front end. Why is that logo still there? Okay. Okay, so I've gotten that far. Next thing I want to do is open a few terminal windows. So if I'm in the project, I want to CD into API in one. And then from there, run yarn dev, and that will run our API in the background on port 7000. Then I want to CD into my React front end, and then yarn dev there as well. So now we've got both things running. And then what the React app does is just throw you into Chrome or whatever your browser is. Maybe I should start using Firefox. So now we've got two terminal windows, one with the API and one with the front end running. And because of this one another terminal where I can actually write some commands, I'm going to open a third terminal tab and CD into my React front end, my web folder. And that means I can just yarn add stuff as I go. So terminal 1 is backend API, terminal 2 is front-end React, terminal 3 is little command center to yarn add stuff. So we can't really see much at the moment. So if we edit app.js, I'm going to say just like Yara here, just an H1, and let's just try and steal some more stuff from Amazon. What does their homepage look like? Now delivering shop millions of new products. Let's just steal that. Except we're going to be better, shipping trillions of new products. And so what I want to have on my website, just to begin with, is a sign-in form. So I'm going to create a new components directory inside the web/source and then components, and a new file in there called sign-in form. So we're going to create a, yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're going to create a new React component. So it's the usual sort of boilerplate. So it's just going to be just a component that just renders. So I'm going to use the function one for that. It's going to be a sign-in form, and it's going to return a HTML form. And then it's up to you, it's sort of stylistic decision, either export default that sign-in form here, or you can actually export default it in one go up here if you want. So import React, we need to do that because we're going to be writing this JSX stuff. And so by having React available here, it knows it's React stuff. Highlight, it says JSX.intrinsic elements. So yeah. And so our form is going to have two fields. So first I'm going to start off with a label. And have some text saying something like email. So sometimes I do this trick and then do the space here. I'm just going to do the whole thing. So it's going to go email and then space like that. So we'll pick that up. So that's actual label. And then an input. And then anyone know what type you use for emails? Yep. And then, so you could add an on-change handler here, but unless we do live validation, we're not going to really do that. We simply just want to know when the user is going to click the little sign in button. So instead, we're going to add a name. I'm just going to call it email as well. And so we'll be able to refer to it. We'll be able to extract it out from the form later on. So it's actually very similar to what Rails does. It uses this name attribute and then that informs what comes across in the params. So like in Rails, you'd have something like params email. So that's our email, and we sort of just want to know if this is working. So I'm going to import it into my app and add it to the page. So up here, import sign in form from components sign in form, and then just shove it on the page. And so if we switch back to our browser, we should see something there. It's the text field like that. And so then we want a password field as well. So I'm going to copy and paste this whole label and paste it in. And this text is now going to say capital P password. Anyone know what the type for password is? Yep. And we'll call it password as well. So there's a lot of repetition there, but this is the type. So this will basically mean it has the bullets. But then password's the most natural name for it as well, so we'll use that same thing there. So normally these two things don't match up, but in this case they do. So we get something like this. And then I'm not quite happy with my layout. These fields are sort of a bit too small and pokey. So I'm going to go to my index.css and add some rules to here. So the first thing I'm going to add is a bit of a CSS reset, and there's a whole bunch available, but you can get away sometimes with just using a simple one here. So I'm going to say all elements, and I just sort of just reset everything. So margin is 0, padding is 0. This box sizing thing, we just say border box. So you probably won't notice anything really. Maybe the H1, H2 don't have any margins on them. And these fields are just too damn small. So by saying font size 1 rem, they'll get that bigger, like so. And then I think there was one more, but I can't remember it now. And so that's 1 rem. So that's relative to my HTML, my HTML tag's font size. So I'm going to add a new rule for my HTML tag and say font size is 20 pixels. So bump it up from the default 16. And I think probably the best thing to do here is actually make this a percentage. So whatever 20 over 16 is, 125. So this is probably best practice like that or something. But to be honest, this has always confused me for however many years. I don't know. So you'll get different opinions on this. So sort of font size, percentage. Yeah. So. And browsers have changed. So there used to be by saying pixels, some browsers would lock that in. But most browsers now you can just zoom in and it just resizes everything. So I don't think it's an issue anymore. But it's so confusing. Yeah, it's a bit silly. I think modern browsers you probably can just go 20 pixels. So here we reset everything, get rid of margins, padding. So it's just like literally everything, like ULs, block quotes, buttons, everything. No margin, no padding. H1s. Everything has a font size of 1 rem, so H1 is now the same size as H2 and so forth. And the fields are nice and big now, not this smally, pokey little thing. So I want my labels to be full width, so I'm going to add a new rule down the bottom here and say label display block. You could also use Flexbox if you wanted to, but I'll just get them like that. And then input, I want those to be full width as well. Input display block, that will get them like that. And then width 100%. And that will make them like that. So in here, just my index.css is just general, just like any like HTML tag, just adding general rules to them. And then in my app.css, I'm going to get rid of this annoying text align center and instead say max width is, let's try 30 rems. Let's see what that looks like. Looks pretty good. And margin auto to then center that thing on the page. And probably enough. So with those styles, I've got something I'm a bit more happy with. I also quite like Bootstrap's utility functions. So I sometimes add those as well. So like MB1, that's just a shortcut for saying margin bottom 0.25 rem. MB2 is shortcut for 0.5 rem. MB3 is 1 rem. So they're just really handy to have. So just, it didn't take me that long to write them. So I just copy that same idea. And then I can just use this then in my form to just make the spacing a little bit more aesthetic. So specifically this label here, I'm going to add a class name and say MB stry2. Add that to both labels. And then there'll be a nice bit of spacing just between them. It's just a bit more readable. So this one here. And let's just add a couple more things. Let's just make H1 have a font size of, let's try 2 REM, see what that looks like, and H2 can be 1.666 REM. Does that look any good? Looks alright. Maybe 1.5. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if that can't. Some people like to use different ratio things where they're different font sizes or mathematically something, but called CSS typographic scale, modular scale. So you have the system like this. I honestly think it's a bit silly, but that is fairly popular. I think it's just all pseudo maths, but I think there is some. It probably does make it look a bit nicer. There we go. I think there's the golden ratio. So these are all tweaks. If you don't get every single one of these, don't despair. I'm just going to add another class to my H2 and say something like, let's try MB3, and just put a little bit of spacing there, and yeah, job done. So you don't have all this sort of spacing stuff. You don't have to do exactly like I've done. You know, feel free to install Bootstrap and stuff as well. We're not. What's that? Well, if you want a cool, nifty one, there's this one called Tailwind CSS. It's really nice. And basically, all the CSS, it seems totally crazy at first. All these CSS properties have their own classes. So it seems bonkers, but once you get used to it, it actually is really nice. So I think that's enough tweaking, enough shuffling the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. So let's build some more functionality. So I'm going to need a button here. And so this button's just going to say sign in. And so we'll see that appear at the bottom here. And that button does look ugly as hell, so we'll just add some CSS for that as well. It's very simple. Padding is going to be 1.5 REM, 1.33 REM. I think that's right. No, the opposite. Just make the button look good in whatever way you want. Background color is going to be the built-in CSS orange. Border is going to be none. I think that's enough. There we go. I've basically just tried to steal Amazon's orange color. Sorry, Yarra's orange color. What color is the Yarra? So in a real app, you'd probably put a bit more effort into your styling, but let's just try and make it look something a little bit nicer. So there's some rules there. So the padding thing here, this first one I think is the top and bottom, and then this one here is the left and the right. So I think that's good to go. Looks decent. So I'm going to add this as a commit. So add sign in form component. And then the next step will to be make it a bit more functional. So with a form, we've got two choices. You could either have on-change events, and we listen to every single time the user presses a key in the email field, and every single time they press a key in the password field. But we just want to let them just type that stuff out, and then we just really care about when they click the sign in button. So one option would be then to say on click and then do a little handle there. However, if we're using a form, we can instead add a different event handler, and that's the on submit to the form. And so any button within the form, when you click it, it will then trigger this on submit of the actual form. So the button has to be inside the form. So on submit is going to be an event handler. And let's just see this work. So I'm going to console log event form submitted, and we'll get, let's just log the event. So go to your form and click the button and see what happens. I'm going to open my inspector. What was the two shortcuts today? Command Option J. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Thanks, Hannah. So, going to have my console open, and if I click that sign in button, you notice what it tries to do is does a little request here. It's basically like old school forms like we had in Rails. So if the method was post, we'll try to do a post request, but by default it tries to do a get request, and so it puts the params in the as a query variable. You get this gross thing, all the stuff I just typed out appearing here. So we don't want that. What we want is to actually turn off that default stuff. We're instead going to do everything in JavaScript. So we turn off the default browser behavior. I think there's a way here to preserve log. So that, because it refreshed the page, that log got cleared. So now if we go to this little setting here, preserve log, click that sign in button, you will actually get that console log form submitted thing. And you can also see here navigated to. So we want to turn that thing off. So very first line in my event handler, I'm going to say event.prevent default. Stop the form from submitting as the browser normally does. So it's basically like turn off the 90s. So now if we clear that and click that button, it's not going to put that stuff in the query variables. We've turned that off. Prevent default and stop that. And so log the events. We see this thing called proxy, and oh my god, does not give you much stuff at all. Maybe a target. No, that wasn't very interesting. Maybe log event.target. Clear the log, click sign in, form submitted, and you'll see we get this HTML form, and if I hover over it, it's the form that is on the page. So the event.target for on submit is the form itself, which makes sense because we attach the on submit to the form. So it makes sense that the target would be that form. So I think there's some way of saying, if we want to get this form, we could do a little thing. I think you could say body.forms or document.forms or something. Yeah, forms, and we could get the first one. That would work. So you could do that. Or you can select the form on the page itself, and then I think you can use the $0. But this is probably even easier, to be honest. So I'm just going to play around with some stuff in my inspector. I'm just going to say var form equals document.forms, which is a list of all the forms on the page, and we've only got one, so we're going to just get the first one. And so if we look at that form, that's going to be that thing there. So I've given these things names, and so you can think of this as like the key in like a key value pair system. This name is the key, and so I can get that thing by saying form.elements and then passing along the key. So if I pass along email, I'm going to get that input. If I say form.elements.password, I'm going to get that input. So because it's got the name password and it's nested inside that form, the old DOM stuff, so this isn't anything to do with React, this is sort of like the DOM stuff that we had last Friday. It gives us the ability to find elements in the form by the key that was specified in this name attribute. So if I want to say form.elements.email.value, I get the actual thing that the user's typed into that field. So I'm getting this yellow thing because of auto-completion, but if you actually type something in, you will get that value. So that's everything we need. So we can extract out the email that they typed out and the password that they typed out. Yep. Do I put a name attribute for the form? No. So I just did document.forms and then get the first one on the page.
Oh, I need that.
Does your form have like an LP check?
I think this must be my 1Password or one of these plugins doing some stuff. See this Data.com Agile bits? That's 1Password, so it's just trying to do this auto completion. And I think I've got another password system, this LastPass, I think this one here.
Okay.
And I'm going to disable that.
Yeah, but I was like, yeah, but it's not likely to do it.
Okay, let's see what that does. There we go. So yeah, that LP thing, that must have been LastPass, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do the same sort of code that's here, but in our onSubmit. So we're going to get the form, and we saw by logging that the form was the event.target. So therefore I'm going to say const form equals event.target. And then because I'm going to be accessing it again and again, I'm going to say const elements equals form.elements. So we can say this is the key value system using the name attributes. Anyway, anyone got a more friendly way of saying that? Allows looking up fields using their name attributes. Sounds a bit more friendly. So we're going to say that the email is going to equal the elements.email.value. And then same thing with the password. Password is going to equal the elements dot password dot value. And then just to sort of see if I've got this working, I'm just going to log this. So handy way to do this is just to put this in a little object, and then I can tell which one's which with the curly braces. So good idea. Come up here, get values from get entered values from fields. So it's a pretty nice system, you know. As I add more fields, I just add them, you know, add more inputs, add more whatever, selects, just give them a name, and then I just add an extra line here to read that thing from the form. So it's pretty, I think it's pretty, like, it's pretty nice. We don't have to add an on submit for every single one, on change for every single one, and so forth. So if we do that, it's going to clear my log, click the sign in button, and go away one password. We can see the email and the password. I've extracted that out properly.
If you remove the AdCoder Academy, do you also get like a validation for email?
Depends on your browser. Yeah.
Because I'm getting one as well. Just want to know where it's coming from. It's
That's Chrome, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh, using Firefox?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Firefox has just got one on by default or something.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So just because you've said type equals email, it can do some validation there. That's all.
Right. So it's not React or anything like that?
No. So everyone able to see email and password come through here?
What is the proto bit?
Proto is like the class. So because it's a normal vanilla object, it's prototype. Its class is object.
So can you get a proxy showing up with?
How come I don't?
Yeah,
Because I said event.target, not event anymore.
no, I get in your console.
Like here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because before I had event, and I've changed it to event.target.
Yeah, that's all right. Oh, okay, sorry.
So put your hand up if you don't have it logging out like this. Everyone's got it working? Yeah. Oh, it's just so because email password. So you could log it like this. It's just that when you log out a lot of information, it can be hard to tell which one's which. So yeah, I can't tell which one's email. Like it's obvious, but if I've got 10 things being logged, I go, oh, which one is the email again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that was the one that I wanted. So it's just a nice little shortcut for logging. So this is just shorthand for saying email has the value email, password has the value password. Yep. So yeah, that's now ready to work. So this form is only concerned with rendering. So most of the things in the components folder should just be doing that. All they care about is just showing stuff on screen. And so instead of doing the actual logging in process itself, it's going to pass this information along to a function prop. So I'm going to say on sign in as a prop coming through here, which is going to be a function. And so that will come through, and then I'm just going to simply say on sign in, and here's your email, and here's your password, and you work out what to do with it. So we pass it up the render tree to whatever rendered the sign-in form. So it's going to be our app, and it's going to handle the actual signing in. So yeah, we could do the Axios or fetch request right here, but it's just nicer to actually just move it up one level. So we know that all works. So I'm just going to get rid of my console logs. So if you want to, you can say pass this information along to the parent component. And I'll add one here. Prevent old school form submission. So yeah, if you've got other forms where you're not sort of doing anything live, like live validation, you just want to know when someone clicks the submit button. This is the general pattern that you can follow. So on sign in is an expected prop. So that means in my app, when I render my sign in form component, I'm going to have to pass something along there. So come to here, sign in form, and so I'm going to have to say on sign in equals some sort of function. So add the on sign in here, and then above we're going to add this little handler on sign in equals a function that accepts an email and a password, array function. And just for the sake of seeing it work here, app receives and then email password. And so this is like an instance method. So on sign in our render, it's going to be this.on sign in. So it's going to refer to this method here. So you should be able to then see that come through. So when we click the sign in, we'll see app received and then the email and password. So it's just the same data, but we're getting it at this level in the app, not the level in the sign in form. So basically just pass a callback function to your component, and then the component decides when to render that. So we're going to say when the form is submitted, extract out the data that we care about, and then pass that to that callback function. So let's just add commit here, add submission of sign in form. So just like we had yesterday with the actual signing in, which was this one here, we want to end up doing the same thing, do an Axios request dot post to this URL, to auth, and pass along this information that we just got from the form. So if you haven't already, you want to call your register and actually sign up as a user. And then that means if you did a post to /auth with those credentials, you should be able to log in. So to do these Axios, requests, we can use Axios. So yarn add Axios inside your web folder. And then in web source, I'm going to create a API directory and create one called init.js. And so I'm going to import in Axios and then create a new Axios instance, axios.create, and we pass along that base URL thing. So base URL is going to be HTTP, localhost, and then whatever port your backend is on. And then we're going to export default this API. So this creates a customized Axios, which we can then post and get and put and stuff. And it's always going to talk to this particular host. So in real life, it would be something like https api.yourapp.com or something like that. So that's the init, and then we want to do some auth stuff. So I'm going to create an auth.js in the API folder. We're going to import the API from the init file. And then I'm going to create a function called sign-in, which is going to accept an email and a password. So what route do I have to hit on the backend, on the API? Auth. And what type of request? What method? Yep, post. So it's going to be api.post to /auth. So post auth, exact same thing as this line here. And this localhost 7000 has been pre-configured by saying base URL is localhost 7000. So we don't have to type that out again and again and again. And so the post request wants this body here, this second part here, email password. So we just pass that in here, email and password. And this is an object, and this is just a shortcut for saying email key has the value email, password has the value password. And when they've got the same name, you can just shorten them like so. And so then we're going to get back the response from Axios, and we want just the data, the actual JSON data. And then we want this available outside of this function, so we're going to say return that, return api.post. And at the moment, nothing is exported from this file, so I'm going to export this particular function, export function sign-in. So that means then we can import it from the outside. Oh, yeah.
Why sometimes you use the name
Because this has auth, so we're going to have another function like
Okay. Yeah.
sign out. So we're going to have another one called sign up. Yeah. So when there's like a whole bunch of different ones, I just export them with the name. If there's just sort of one thing, I just export default. So export function sign in. And so then in my app, I'm going to import that in. Import that sign in function we just wrote from API folder and then the auth file that we're just literally just writing in. So that's that function that we're just right here. So it's a function that does the request to our API. And so we can do that here in our handler then. We can say sign in, pass along that email and password. And then once that's completed, we'll get back that data from our API. And one of the things we'll get is like that token. So we'll be able to say just like, let's just console log the data. So signs in data. And let's see how far we can get. So we will actually get an error, but so we're almost there. And at first this error is really cryptic. No access control allow origin headers present. Doesn't seem very friendly. And so the two crucial bits of information here is that the fact that we're this React app is localhost 3000. And then the API is localhost 7000. And by default, the browser doesn't allow things on different ports or different domains to talk to each other. So these things are called domains, or another word for domain is origins. So we're basically saying access control allow origin. We're not allowing, this backend isn't allowing this origin here to access it. So we have to add a special header. Specifically the access control allow origin header. Sounds pretty complicated. So I'm going to create a new terminal tab and cd into my API folder.
Which API one?
My backend Node.js API.
Okay.
So new terminal tab, cd into your API Node.js Express stuff. And that means we can yarn add some stuff. And what we're going to add is the cause package that people found the other day. Blah, 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 blah. Where is it? Configures the access control allow origin header. So that's the thing that we're just looking at, that issue. And so there's a whole bunch of things. You can sort of set up a, say, this origin. You can set up a regular expression to sort of say matching this origin. You can have an array of origins. We're just going to make it really simple and just allow everything to access us. So that's what it does by default. So in my API folder, the top level one, server.js, going to require this package in, const cause equals require cause, and I'll have to add it, yarn add cause. So yarn add cause, const cause equals require cause. What's that? So this is like third-party stuff, and then this is like my stuff. So I just grouped them like that. And then so we're gonna. This is like a middleware. So I'm gonna again put it sort of in order of importance. So we just run the cause middleware creator, and we just want the default options, which just allows everything. So allow other origins to access us. I'm going to say IE React front end. So yarn add cause, require it in, and then plonk it in your server. So you should have a yarn dev thing running with node 1 for your backend, and so that will just automatically reload. And so now when we click the sign in button, it should now actually work. So the app received email and password, then it sent it on its way to the API. It did a post request, and I received this token back. And if we go to the network tab and click sign in again, we'll see that request come through. I think my font's just a bit too big. Oh, here it is. Auth. And we can see that request to our backend. HTTP localhost 7000/auth. It did a post request. And the response header said access control allow origin and this little star. So it's been added by the cause package. And star means allow everything. So now the browser's happy, and we can actually get this JSON response back. So a lot of the APIs that we've been using would have a header like this. So we get back the token. And so what we normally want to do is store that token. So anyone not seeing this happen? Cool. So we're able to actually do a request to sign in, and what that request gives us back is this JSON data, which you see here, and that includes a token. So as you might recall from yesterday, we need that token for things that require JWT. So we added to our products. We said auth middleware.require JWT. So that requires this authorization header to be provided with the JWT in its glory passed along there. And so we are going to do the same sort of thing, but in React. So the first thing we need to do is actually keep this token. And what we're able to do, if you look up the Axios docs, is that you can pass along headers. So any of these requests, you can say like post and config. And one of the keys in config is headers. So we can say authorization, just like this, and then bearer, and then put our token in there. But it would get really annoying having to do that for every single post request and every single GET request, to have to pass that along every time. So what Axios allows you to do is to change the defaults. So you can see that here. And so we can say axios.defaults.headers, and then common means like get, post, patch, any of the methods. Set the authorization header to this value. And so any future Axios requests will have that header in place. What we've done is created an Axios instance, axios.create, and we can just do it the same way. So we say our instance, so it's going to be api.defaults.headers. Blah 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 blah. That thing has this value. So we're going to do the same sort of thing. And so that means that any future request, it's always going to pass it along this header like so. So there's a fair bit of code here. So I've just committed at this point. What was it? Git log. I said connect sign in to API. So in my init file, I'm going to create a function called setToken. It's going to accept the token, and it's basically just going to do this. So our Axios instance is called API. So api.defaults.conf. Well, I've already forgotten. .headers.common. And then the header called authorization, if I can spell it. And then that equals. And then it wants to be like that bearer thing. And so we're going to use the little template string, capital B bearer, space, and then punch in our token there. So that's going to do that hard work of setting all that stuff up on the API. And so I'm going to make this available outside of this file, so I'm going to say export that function. So now being exported is this set token thing. So in our app, we're going to let's just load in these products. So let's first start off by not passing that header. So we're not going to call that set token thing for now, and then we'll compare it to when we log in. So I'm going to say component did mount. So when this app first appears on screen, and then I want to load the products. So we're going to go and in my API folder, create a products file. It's going to import API from the init. And it's going to export a function. I'm just going to say list products. And so that's going to be a api.get/products, and then we extract out the data from the response. So that talks to our localhost 7000, does the get/products, and then we just care about the JSON data, so we just conveniently extract that out. So if you recall, this is the one where we need that authorization header. So list products is the name. It's going to copy that because then I'm going to import it in. So go to type of app, and I'm going to import curly braces list products from API/products. And so when I mount, I'm going to call that list products dot then. We should hopefully receive our array of products. I'm just going to console log them out. Console log out the products. And then if we had an error, we'll catch that. And we'll console error that out. So because we're not passing the right header, we'll expect this bit of code down here to actually run. So if you go to your browser, I think we should see something. So switch back, and here we go. Get localhost 7000/products 401, which is unauthorized. And here we get our error loading products. So this first line here is just the browser telling us. And then this next line here is our console.error, error loading products. Error, request failed with status code 401.
Yeah, that's the source.
And so that's because we're not passing along an authorization header. So at this point here, when we sign in, we say sign in, we get this data, and what we get back is a token. JSON data, the value for the key, token. And so what I'm going to do is import that set token function that changes our Axios instance that was in the init. So import set token. We're then going to pass that token along to it. So this set the authorization header in Axios. And so now all future requests will have that header, that authorization header set. So now what I'm going to do is just copy and paste the same code from here, list products, and run it again, and see what happens this time. Copy and paste from down here. Load products again with token now set. So clear my log, just refresh the page. So we get the original 401, click sign in, which will get that token back, and then you'll see that will then say list products, and then you can see that here. So maybe it's a bit easier if you say console log and then loaded products. So let's clear and refresh that again. Sign in, loaded products, and then you can see that they've come through successfully. So what was the difference? If you go to your network tab, you'll see two GET requests to /products, and so compare the headers. So if I'm just going to close down this console because I'm sort of running out of room. So here's the original products when we mounted. You can see it was 401, 400 and 500 ones are errors, so Chrome highlights it in red. And so we get back this response, unauthorized, and the headers that were passed, the request headers, there was no authorization passed along there. Request headers, nothing to see. The second one is this one here. So we'll do this options thing, you sort of just ignore those. It's the second one here. So that was our second request, once we've signed in. And you can see here, authorization bearer, and then that big long JWT token. So because it was passing along this token, then the backend was like, thumbs up, you're authorized. And so it gave back the actual JSON data. So you need to set this authorization header. And so we do that. You notice that I didn't pass that header to the list products. Like I could have done something like token, like that. And then in my products I go, okay, I got the token. And then I go, okay, here's the headers. And then authorization has all this stuff. But it'll be a pain in the ass to have to do that for every single request and go, oh, here's the token. Okay, here's the token for this one. Like do it every single time you do a get or post or anything like that. You go, okay, here's the token. So what we do instead is change this API instance, and we say set the authorization header for any requests in the future, for all requests in the future. And so we don't need to pass that along every time we do a get. It's just configured here. Hey, here's the default headers. Just pass this along to every single future request. And so that's why by saying authorization equals bearer token, that's why, whoops, if I don't break everything, that's why when we sign in, that header is actually being passed. It's by this code here. So if we did something else, get categories or like list categories or something like that, that request is going to pass along the token as well, and any other future requests. Okay. Typos, it's American spelling, not said instead of it.
Which one?
Authorization.
Did you set up .env for this one as well, Toyota? Yeah, I did too, but I can't get it working.
Wait,
Oh, you added it? I added it to the web.
I didn't add it to the. Why?
I just did it yesterday. I thought, what the hell, it should be easy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
You have to make sure you do the right
Oh,
part.
that was.
It's hard to send it because it's in the
What's that?
You were going to super
It's in the root folder.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, halfway through the 6 months screen, so I remember it come back.
Okay, I'm going a bit slow.
Like, I'm feeling
But I
that,
know
and
you
then we'll
are
run
able
back and
to
fill them
get
all out.
the
Okay.
React.
Because you're not meant to have the token. You saw the examples they had? They use the .env file for the token.
I didn't.
So what I'd expect it to do when you sign in is to like say who the user who's signed in, who they are. So maybe just display some information that we have. All we really have is the email, so display that. And we'll get rid of the form. We don't need to show that anymore because they're signed in. So we'll do that now. So to store that, I'm going to add some state. And you can call this whatever you want. You could call it the token payload. I decided to call it the decoded token. And so that's going to start it off as nothing because we haven't signed in yet. And so we get our token here, and that's the raw token, that base64 encoded thing. And so we need a library to decode it, and so there's one here called JWT decode. That's very, very small. Just get the gobbledygook token like that. We pass it along here, and it gets the payload as passed JSON. If there's something wrong with the token, it'll throw an error. So we're going to add this here, JWT-token. So in your React folder, not the API one, yarn add JWT-decode. And so we could do all this stuff in our app, but I prefer to keep as much stuff as possible tucked away. So what we're going to do is get our sign-in method to actually return us the decoded token. And so it's going to be an auth. So we get our data. And I'm going to create a new token.js file that's going to handle all this sort of token stuff. And we're just trying to figure out how to architect this. We'll get to a different architecture along the road, so maybe we'll just decode it right here. We'll come to that token.js later. So I'm going to import decode JWT from, and then whatever the hell that thing was called, JWT decode. So I call it decode JWT because it's really just a function, so turn it into more of an active verb or whatever the hell that is. And so we get the token from the data, const token equals res.data.token. We then decode it, so call it the decoded token equals running that thing through the decode JWT function. And then that's going to be the result of our promise, so we just return that. So when someone says sign in, calls that and does a .then, they're going to get back the decoded token. So it gives us back the raw token, that gobbledygook and JSON. We turn the gobbledygook into actual key value pairs by decoding it, and then we return that back. So that means our sign in here, it's not just going to give us this data, it's going to give us the decoded token. So we can console log that out if we wish. And then we're going to go back to our old friend this.setState, and we're going to set the decoded token to this new one. And then all this stuff was really just for demonstration, so I'm going to delete it all. So now we just say sign in, then we get the decoded token, and then we change our state, decoded token here, and set state will cause it to re-render. So in my render, then I can say const and then extract out the decoded token from this.state. For some reason, decoded token is kind of fun to say. And then we're going to do a ternary operator here. And so if we've got a decoded token, we're going to display some sort of message. So I'm just going to say email colon and then punch in the decoded token dot email. Otherwise, we're going to show the sign-in form. So if we're signed in, that means we'll have a decoded token. And so we'll be able to get the information from the payload. So one of the things in the payload was the email. We can say, hey, your email is this. Otherwise, it means that they're not signed in, so we'll show the sign-up form. So this handles the hide the sign-up form when they're signed in thing as well. And I think that should do the trick. So it's start off as null, and so that means we'll display the sign-in form. Once we've signed in, we say talk to the API, sign in. That does a whole bunch of stuff, including decoding the token here. We get that back in the promise. So we get that decoded token and we store that in our app state.
Do we need to assign it in this .set state to the decoded token key, or does it just do it automatically?
This is just short
Okay.
hand for that.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, try that out. See if you can click the sign in button and if the email then appears. So here's mine. Sign in. And there we go. Email patrick.smith at blah, 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 blah. If we go to my React tab, you can see my app. And you can actually see this state on the right-hand side here. And you'll see that decoded token. And that's the payload of that JWT. It's effectively what you'd get if you got that raw token, went to this website, and pasted it in here. And it'll be this pink part here, the payload. So that gets put here. So you can maybe token payload, they're all pretty crummy names really. I just decided to call it this. I didn't call it token because that suggests it's more like the original base64 version. So say decoded token. So if you wanted more information, like the first name or whatever, when you sign your token on the back end, you could pass that information along, and then you'd be able to access it here. I mean, if you want to, we could display some more stuff with this. So we've got the date of expiry and the issue that time. So we could, for instance, let's just try this out. So signs in at, let's see if this will work. New date decoded token dot IAT. Let's see what that displays. Doesn't like it. Put that in the div. Now let's see what it does. Sign in. Obviously knows values as React Children, but so dot to ISO strings. Try it again. There we go. So signed. Ooh. So I think we need to then times it by 1,000 because JavaScript is weird, so it wants milliseconds. There we go. So 2017 12:07 blah blah at UTC time, so it's 1:25 AM. So there's the code for that. If you want that exciting information on your website. And then once you got that out, you could copy and paste that and say it's going to expire at, it's going to be the decoded token.exp instead. So if you wanted to, you could use moment.js or do some maths and sort of say, hey, you're going to be signed out in like 7 hours. So new date, the date, if you just pass one thing, it expects a Unix timestamp, like Unix time, just a number since 1970. JavaScript is weird, so normally you just use seconds. JavaScript wants milliseconds, so you times 1,000 to get milliseconds. And then we just chose a random ISO string because it's sort of easy to read. And there we go. So signed in at 1:27 AM, and then it's going to expire in 7 days from now, so on the 14th of December. So now you can thrill your website visitors with that information. So that's probably worthy of a commit. So I'm going to say display user information, signed in user info. Oh, display user info when signed in. There we go. So that does the trick. However, if we reload the page, or the rec gets reloaded for us because we changed one character here, it's going to refresh usually. Maybe it's doing something smart there with the state. But if we refresh the page, now we're signed out again. So it'd be great if we could store that in the browser somehow. And so there's a thing called local storage. Web applications can store data locally with the user's browser using local storage. It's a pretty simple API. It's one of those things called a key value store. So you set values for keys. And so half of what this course has been using one of those. So we say set item for this key, this value. So we're going to do that same thing with our token. Then later on, so that stores it permanently. So cross page refreshes. And then when we want to get that thing back later, we're going to say get local storage.get item for that key, and if there's a token, we'll return it. If there's not one, it'll be null. And we're eventually going to get to, for signing out, we're just going to do this. Remove item for that key. That forgets the token, and then that's equivalent to basically signing out. So we're going to use this little API. And I'm going to encapsulate all this stuff in this token.js within web source API. So first I need a key, and I'm just going to call it user token. I suppose you could call it token, but we might have different services we talk to, so I'm just going to call this the user token. Then we're going to have one function that saves the token. So it gets past that raw token. And we're basically just going to use this API here. Local storage.set item. I put that key in a variable up here, so we don't have to type it out again and again. And then we're going to set the token like so. And I'm going to make this a little bit smarter, so we're going to check if the token exists. If so, we're going to set the item. Else, we're going to say local storage dots, and then whatever it was called, remove item for that key. So we'll either be able to pass the actual token, or we'll be able to delete the token and sign them out with this one function. So remember the token, or clear the remembered token, also known as signing out. So that's the write aspect, and then we've got the read aspect. And I'm actually trying to remember what I did. I think I just said get token. Might refactor this as we go. So this is going to be the get item for that key. However, we ideally would do some sort of validation here. So maybe the browser has corrupted the data somehow. Maybe the user's gone in and twiggled with their local storage. Maybe there's just some reason why the token's not valid. Maybe our token system has changed. So going to import the decode token thing, decode JWT from JWT decode. And we're going to decode the, see if this token is okay. So I'm going to put that in a variable called decoded token. And so what happens if this token is valid? The docs tell us, it says it's going to throw an error. So to make this safe, I need to surround this thing to protect it against any errors. Try, and then catch. This is when we have an invalid token. If this was successful, then we'll get to the here, a valid token. So you could do this, and that would be sort of okay. However, there's one extra thing that I want to do, and to check that expiry date. And you'll see that this decoded token thing doesn't check that for you. So somewhere it says here, important, this library doesn't validate the token. Our well-formed JWT can be decoded, but you should validate the token yourself. So basically the thing you want to validate is the expiry date. And so I just googled some code the other day and I came up with something like this. So const now equals date.now. And because JavaScript is weird, it gives you that in milliseconds, we want to convert that to seconds. And so that decoded token is going to look, if we look at that JWT, so it's going to have all this information, including the expiry date. And so we're going to check if if it's expired, basically. Check if token has expired. If it's expired, then the server's not going to accept it, and so we should ignore it. There's no point in having a token that's expired. It's the same thing as having no token at all. So it's just a security thing. The tokens expire after a period of time. So we're going to say if now is less than the decoded token .exp. If now is greater than, that means we're past the expiry date. And so that means we have no token. So I'm going to rename this function because it's not just getting the token, it's actually getting a valid token. So function get valid token. It's going to do a bit more work for us, which is nice. It's not going to just dumbly read it. It's going to give us something useful. So it's going to decode it, make sure it's decodable. Next thing, it's going to check the expiry date. So if the current time is past the expiry date, we're going to return null. If it had an error by decoding the token, we're going to return null. And then finally here, I'm going to move this valid token thing here and say return token. So we're only going to return a token if it passes all of these trials of fire here. So it needs to be able to decode, needs to not have it expired, and then that's how the success story down here. Everything else, it's invalid. So I encapsulate that sort of all that hard work in this token.js, and encapsulate that in this get valid token function that does all that work. So both of these functions we want to export. We want to make them available outside of this file. And so what we'll be able to do is just import a save token function and import a get valid token function. And you'll notice that the outside world will just be able to just call those two functions, and they'll have no idea whether we're using local storage or sending it to the moon or encoding it in dirt or whatever system we use to store it. It's all encapsulated within this file. Whereas when we use these two functions here, we'll have no idea if it's using local storage or not. So that's a good design pattern to fall into. So I think that's the two sort of cases, save token, get valid token. I think that's sort of it. And so in my auth, here we know I've got a token. So I'm going to import this. This is where it gets complicated. I'm going to add one more function actually. So get valid token, we're then going to add another function, export function get decoded token. So we're just going to handle that here. So we're going to get the valid token by saying get valid token. If there was a valid token, we're then going to proceed to decode that token. Else, we're going to return null. So probably this could be a little bit unsafe if we don't know what this function is doing. You notice that it says it throws if it's invalid, but at this point we should know that it's valid. So this should be safe. The other way you could write this is having another try catch block. And so we get return null here. And then instead of doing if, because it's going to be decoding a null token will be bad, I can actually just pass it some invalid data like that. And just go, you deal with it. If you don't like null, you just throw an error. And in that case, I'm just going to return null. So in some ways, this code is probably safer than this code here. What's that? Oh, yeah. So I guess it's sort of, there's either this one or this one. It's really sort of up to you, I guess. Can't actually tell which one I like better. Let's just do the first, save some typing. So it's going to do the work of decoding it for us. So then sort of all the different token stuff is just handled in this one file. Save it so we remember it for later. Get the valid token, so read it and make sure it's valid. There's going to be no real use case where we want to get the token and have it be invalid, so we do that validation. And then we want to decode the token. And so at that point too, we're going to want to have a valid token as well to decode it. So yeah, those are three things there. Save token. So in my auth, I'm going to import that in. Import save token from the token file. And so when we save, when we log in, when we sign in, we get the token back here. And so I'm going to say, okay, save that token. And in fact, I'm going to backtrack. So this is what I originally had, and I decided to change the design because we're going to end up saving the token and setting the headers. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to move this instead to this set token method here. So I'll just undo. This is what we had before.
So we're going to do that ourselves? Or?
Yep. And so I sort of just want one place where all this work gets done. So in my init, I've got the set token. So I'm going to put that save token in here from the token directory. And so it's going to do two things. It's going to set the headers, and it's going to save the token. So now I've just got one place that does all that work for us. So I think this is a better design. If you wanted it to be like C token and set token looks very similar, this is where maybe I'd rename this to maybe remember token or something like that. Maybe that's a better name. So save the token. And then that ends up saving it in local storage. And while we're here, we'll be able to pass a null token. So I'm just going to do similar sort of if statement as the local storage thing. And so if we've got a valid token, we're going to set that header. Otherwise, copy that thing and use the delete keyword to delete the value for that key. Yeah, it's all this stuff's like, this isn't the, like, it's fairly complex. I'll admit that. And it's actually quite hard to get right. Like, this is probably the fourth or fifth like sort of design I've done for this, and this is been the one I'm most happy with so far. So this token, this will be just this one place. We get a new token. It's going to save it in local storage, and it's going to set the API headers. If it's null, we'll see that the save token handles that for us. It either removes it or sets it. And then we do another if statement here. We either set the authorization header or we remove that authorization header.
Dumb question. With
Yeah.
the JWT token, I get why the signature
Yeah.
is encoded.
Yeah.
But the first two parts, given that you can just like plug it in a decoder and it comes back out,
Yeah.
what is the purpose of that being decoded? Being encoded in 64, base 64 or whatever it is.
Why is it?
The payload data, you mean?
Yeah, the payload data.
Yeah.
Is
What's the?
what advantage do you get from that being stored in that way? Because couldn't you just have the payload data as it appears?
Oh, as JSON.
Yeah, and then the
Yeah.
signature at the end as it is?
It's just to make this. The reason for that is it just makes it easier to parse.
Okay.
So if this payload data could have John H.do in there, and so this period is going to make it harder. If we just put the raw data in here, it's going to interfere with this period that we're using to separate it.
Okay.
So that period doesn't. It's base 64 encoded, so you can see it's not actually a period in there.
They couldn't
So you
do
just-
quotes?
What's that?
Put it in quotes or something?
Yeah, but then if you do a dot split, that's not going to work.
And I suppose if you have a shitload of data, base 64 would compress it significantly.
Maybe, and it's just also just sort of like I think so. It's partly that, so you can put a period there. It's also just like it's just this raw thing, and sort of like you're not really meant to.
It's neater.
It's just like you're just going to pass it along. You're not tempted to really pass it and do weird stuff with it. So that means that you're going to use a standard library like decode JWT instead of rolling your own.
Okay.
So it's sort of like
And another question: if you've got
Yeah.
a sophisticated user,
yeah,
who've signed off on their token,
yeah,
they can decode the purple section,
Yeah.
add in some other values or stuff around with their name or their email, maybe to mimic somebody else, and
Yeah.
then re-inject it.
yeah. But the
Um,
signature is going to be wrong. So what happens in that case?
Right, because the signature has to match the payload that was inserted into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Flushed together and then.
Yeah.
Got it. Sorry.
Yeah.
A bit slow.
No, it's fine. No, this is fine.
So you don't need SSL then? Yeah.
No, you do need SSL. You still need that. SSL just means are you talking to the right service? So if you don't have SSL, you could be talking to the Russians or something like that. But yeah, that's what this this whole strategy thing does. So it extracts that auth header, authorization, bearer token, does the checking, there's the key, checks that algorithm, and then you can see here require JWT. That is the middleware that then does that checking for you. Yeah, a lot of moving parts.
Explain the entire line like that.
So we're almost there, so just keep going.
Oh, we're almost there.
So what
Just use device.
so this set token is then going to do both the saving of the token and setting the headers. So I just prefer that as a design rather than having to call two separate functions. So therefore in our auth we're going to import that API and then comma set token here as well. So that's that set token. So we get our token here, then we call the set token. Where the green bit is. So it's going to do two jobs. It's going to remember the token for us in local storage, and it's going to set that authorization header.
Is it not possible for someone to sort of write this and
Package it up. Yeah, of course. I was thinking of doing it. Yeah.
With a callback where you got specific data or something. Necessarily, maybe.
Yeah, you could do. I mean, different APIs will have different routes, so you probably want to make that a variable. But yeah, you could publish this as a package, and yeah, I was thinking about doing that. Oh, there probably is. It's probably like 10 of them, and one of them's good. So just have to do that research. And plus, you're not learning as much if we did that. So this is worthwhile thing to learn about, I think. Yeah, a lot of pack.
You can explain one by one now, whatever you do.
So we're manually decoding the token here, and to have lack of duplication, I'm going to remove that, and instead rely on the one in here, get decoded token. So in my auth, I'm going to import that. Get rid of this import decode JWT. I'm going to import the get decoded token here. That's going to handle all our token business. And so then I just return get decoded token like that. So that should work the same. So that will be saving in local storage. However, when we boot our app up, what would be great is if it could give us the decoded token here instead of null. So we're going to add that. The other thing that would be great is that I decided to do it here. We're actually going to check, as soon as we boot up our app, check if the token has expired. So I'm going to do something a little bit interesting here. So I'm going to go back to the init file, and this is just, again, this is just how you want to design this, is up to you. So you're going to import save token, going to import get valid token. And so what I'm going to do probably seems a bit strange, but I'm going to basically say get the valid token, call that, and then immediately save that back to local storage. So this basically just validates the token, and if it's invalid, remove it from local storage. So that just bypasses issues where that token's expired, and
Right, so you save it null. It's invalid.
yeah, so if this token is expired or invalid somehow, we're going to get null, and then if you look at the save token, it decides to delete that from local storage. So it's just a little trick. Where you put that, I actually can't decide the best place to put it, but I just decided to put it here. Oh, and this needs to be, sorry, this needs to be set token, not save token. So by setting the token, we also not only save the token, I might rename this to remember token, but we also set the default authorization headers as well. So it does the two birds with one stone. So that's that done. Finally, we need to come to here, and we're going to import get decoded token from API token, and our initial state is simply just going to go and call that decoded token equals get decoded token. So if you remember, what that does is it reads the token from local storage, it decodes it. If it's invalid, it'll be null. If it's not, if it is valid, we'll keep checking. It's going to check the expiry date. If it's expired, it's going to be null. So if it's all just invalid or expired, it's just going to end up being null anyway. So it's signed out. But if it's passed all that stuff, then we're going to decode the token and get the information sitting here. And that's going to do it as soon as we boot up our app. So basically what this means is restore the previous signed in data. So if we refresh our page, it's going to be as if we're just signed in again. So if that's a valid token, we're going to come down here, and we're going to be able to display the email and all this other information, and we won't have to display the signed in form. So you notice that that is just a tweak to my state, my initial state. It wasn't a tweak to doing anything clever in my render. That just worked as before. Just simply goes, do we have a token? This path. Do we not have a token? That path. So I think all that huge amount of work, I think that should... And next we don't need set token anymore. You can delete that, which is great. Because the sign-in method is doing that, setting the token for us, so we can delete that. And I think that's it. Phew. So I think now, don't know why it keeps doing that, it's really annoying. If we refresh the page, it's remembering the previous information. It seems to have a billion errors for some reason. What's it doing there? Oh my, oops. Cannot read property token. So there's probably something wrong in list products here. Let's quickly see what the hell that's doing. What's it doing? I think that's just old code or something. Okay, get rid of that. Refresh, and that's working as it should. So we see, if we go to the Rack tab, we see that we're getting the decoded token. So that's already restored there by saying decoded token equals get decoded token. If we go to our, I think it's application, they might have moved it. No, which one is it? Network memory? Console. Somewhere you can see the local storage, I forget which one it is actually. Oh, there it is, application, local storage, open that up, and then there's our user token. So if I delete that little thing, delete selected, so there's the token stored in local storage. It's been stored there by this line here, local storage.set item. I delete that, refresh the page, and we're signed out. Sign in again, and you'll notice then a new one's put there. If I should be able to edit this, if I put in invalid, refresh the page, it's going to try and decode that token, sign out again, and you notice it's deleted it as well. And so that automatic deletion was handled by this line here. Just reads it in, checks it's valid, and then immediately saves it again. So if it's not valid, we'll see that it will go and remove item from local storage if it's not.
What did you do to correct the product error again?
Nothing. We're going to get rid of, after lunch, we'll get rid of this thing and do it in a slightly different way.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's doing a lot. So we've actually handled a whole heap there. And it's a bit of a higgledy-piggledy mess because there's a sort of different best practices and edge cases and stuff. But fortunately, what I've given you, I think, is pretty bulletproof. And so you should be able to just, for all your projects, literally just copy and paste this token file, and probably even just copy and paste this auth file in, and so forth.
And the init file.
And the init file, yep. So before I finish, I'm just going to make one little improvement. I just want save token is too similar to set token, so I'm going to rename this to remember token. And I'm going to update everything where it says save token to remember token. So I can do a global find, and there we go.
How did you do the global file?
Command Shift F, and then you get this thing in the sidebar. Or you just click on that button, I think. Yeah.
Which button was? Oh, that one right there.
Yeah. So I think that remember token is a better name, and it all still works. There we go. So it's a good point to commit. So we're going to say remember and restore token in local storage. This thing, and you expand the arrow, so there's your find and there's your replace. Or just click the sidebar little search thing. Very, very simple. So what the hell is happening to that screen? That's just weird. Here we go. Come on, there we go. So we've got this functionality at the moment. You're able to sign in, but we aren't able to sign out yet. So if we come to our app, going to add a button. So this is the section where you're signed in with your details. This is going to say sign out or log out or whatever you want to call it. And so then we need to work out what that's going to connect to. And so I suppose you could put this in the you could probably just put this in the here or auth and just go this one here, set token null. But what I just decided to do was make a little function here in auth, export function sign out. And because it doesn't have to talk to the server, I made it a bit apparent that it's not returning a promise. So just call it sign out now. And then to sign out now, all we have to do is to say set token and null. That's it. So we basically just forget the, put that here, forget the token. So we export that out, import it into app.js, and so now we're importing sign in and sign out now. And so I'm going to make a little thing here on sign out equals an array function. It's going to call that sign out now function. So basically that says set token null, and what that ends up doing is deleting it from local storage and getting rid of the bearer token for the authorization header. And then our app just needs to get its data up to scratch. So just going to say set state decoded token and null. And then down here, we're going to connect this button to say on click equals this dot on sign out. So clicking that button will affect the local storage stuff and our local state. That will re-render, and so suddenly we're going to get this being null, and so we're actually going to be thrown onto the sign-in form again. It's going to, having the truth in state like this makes it really, like I didn't have to touch render at all there. As soon as we don't have a token, then it's going to show the sign-in form again. So I think that should now work. We've got the sign-in button. Click it, and we're back to the sign-in form.
Can you put the source back up again?
Yeah.
I think you're not careful with this time.
No, that's the term. Yeah. I'll just commit that and push that directly up. Add sign out button. Was that really that fast? Oh, okay.
We're halfway through typing and scroll up again.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Usually I'm
Students are idiots.
usually I'm slower. Usually I'm slower after lunch, so I'm surprised that it wasn't like a sloth. So just run through what I added.
Yeah.
This auth.js, so web source API auth.js, added this stuff here. And so that's exported out so we can use it. And then in app.js, we imported it. Then we create a function that's going to do two things. Call that sign out function and change the state. So get rid of the decoded token. And then here we've got a decoded token, so this is saying we're signed in. Then we've got this div, and then I've just added this button inside there. On click equals that on sign out thing that we just wrote. If you want to, you can make your code a little bit more clearer. You could say create a new constant called signed in, and it's going to be equal to this thing not being null, and then that will make the ternary very clear here. We'll say if we're signed in, we're going to show this. If not, we're going to be signed out. So we show the sign in form. So adding this little line here might just make things a bit clearer. I sometimes use little variables as almost like documentation or comment. So I like that world's smallest commit. Clarify. Ternary. This thing's broken. So if you want to see those changes on GitHub, you simply come to here. I'm pushing to the master branch, which I now regret, but there it is. And then you go to the little time thing here with 18 commits. And so the change I just made here was the add sign out button commit. And you'll see green and red highlighted bits for the changes that I've just made. So you get to that just from the challenges channel, click on that, go to the commits, and find the commit that you want. There we go. So I've got some challenges here. Yay!
Now we totally understand everything.
Challenge 1, explain what's going on.
Challenge 1, understand what's happening.
That's right.
So
You can get some of that.
paste them here.
Yeah, you saw this.
That's cool. Yeah.
I'll see if you